Tonight, the March for Life.
My prayer in the pro-life movement is that people will wake up.
Nearly 50 years after the Supreme Court decision legalizing abortion in America. Plus, a rare sighting.
One sighting in X number of years, and it's a newsworthy event. That kind of says something in and of itself.
And a rude awakening.
He's going to be a key in the midterms. We're going to need him out.
Republicans gearing up for the midterm elections predict doom for Democrats, even as the grand old party clings to former President Trump. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The annual March for Life comes to Washington. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. Tonight marks 49 years since the Supreme Court legalized abortion in America, ruling on Roe v. Wade, and the pro-life movement is gaining momentum. Protesters numbering in the tens of thousands marching from the National Mall in Washington, D.C., all the way to the Supreme Court. CBN senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener has more in tonight's top story.
This is the largest human rights demonstration in the world. People from all over the country coming here to the nation's capital for the annual March for Life. The numbers may be slightly down this year due to COVID, but the mood is especially upbeat because this may be the last march under Roe v. Wade. For almost a half century, the pro-life movement has dreamed of a post-Roe America. 49 years ago, the case legalizing abortion across the country. The controversial 1973 ruling has been the driving force behind the march, over the years attracting politicians, mostly Republicans and other high-profile pro-lifers, to address the crowd at the National Mall before marching from the Washington Monument down Constitution Avenue to the Supreme Court. But many legal analysts believe Roe's days are numbered, predicting the justices will uphold a Mississippi law that bans most abortions after 15 weeks in the case Dobbs v. Jackson, Women's Health. If so, it would essentially set aside the court's abortion precedents in Roe and in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, affirming Roe in 1992.
I have great hope that that is the truth. I think it's by the prayers and grassroots efforts of people who are willing to stand for life and commit to that in a real way that has moved the hearts of our nation, and I hope the hearts of our justices as well.
Life is the most important human right, and without this right, no other rights matter, so that's why it is so important to defend this basic human right.
It's a basic human right that we need to hold, and a mistake was made in Roe v. Wade. We're here to reverse their decision.
Organizers say this is not just a protest, but also a celebration of life, one with significant political influence. In the last 20 years, moving from all volunteer to a professional organization, mobilizing hundreds of thousands to petition federal lawmakers to strip Title IX funding from Planned Parenthood and to advance various anti-abortion bills. Supporters are also credited for helping pressure politicians to appoint conservative justices to the Supreme Court, including Samuel Alito in 2006, followed by Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. Vice President Mike Pence addressed the March for Life. So did Donald Trump in 2020, the first sitting president to do so. This year, the march also attracting high-profile speakers.
Every child matters. Every woman matters. Every person matters.
Nationwide polls suggest the majority of Americans do support abortion rights, but years of activism by pro-life supporters may have brought Roe v. Wade closer than ever to being reversed. At the March for Life, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Today's march, 49 years after Roe v. Wade, marks a cultural shift in America. While abortion clinics are closing, pro-life pregnancy centers are opening up, outnumbering them by a rate of 4 to 1 rather. And with a more conservative Supreme Court, pro-life supporters are feeling upbeat about the prospects of overturning the Supreme Court precedent. CBN's Charlene Aaron has that story.
For 25 years, the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, or NIFLA, has equipped pregnancy centers to serve women and their communities. Now, after all the time, work, and money, its leaders and supporters are talking about the potential end of legalized abortion in America. The numbers and accomplishments tell the story of how this organization helps women choose life. Some 1,600 U.S. pregnancy centers, the introduction of using ultrasounds to the pro-life movement.
Since we started that, over 1,300 pro-life medical clinics utilizing ultrasound are in existence across the country. And an abortion-minded woman comes in, she's been told it's a blob of tissue, she sees the ultrasound, and bingo, we've seen huge numbers of women choose life because of that.
Alveda King applauds the boots-on-the-ground work.
The pregnancy care centers are the heart of the pro-life movement. And the reason I believe that, they don't just say to a mother who comes to the door and she's pregnant and faced with a decision to birth a child or not, but they speak to the mother, they support the birth of the child, the father is welcome, and the community is welcome. So I'm very fond of NIFLA's work.
Many pro-life advocates are optimistic that the culture is changing in favor of life. That includes Abby Johnson, a former manager in the abortion industry.
Right now, though, I'm so hopeful. I mean, we've got, I think, almost 4 times the number of pregnancy centers as we have abortion clinics in the United States. Abortion clinics are, closing down year after year. Culture is changing. Young people's minds are changing.
My prayer in the pro-life movement is that people will wake up, that the eyes of the nation and the world will open and realize that life is sacred from the womb to the tomb, and that there are life-affirming solutions that do not require that we kill the youngest, the weakest, and most innocent, the babies in the womb. I pray that we wake up, open our eyes, and choose life.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Charlene. Here with us now is Chelsea Yeoman. She is Human Coalition's Director of Public Policy and a constitutional law expert. Chelsea, welcome to Faith Nation. 49 years of the March for Life after 49 years of legalized abortion in America. Chelsea, I'd like to know, what are you thinking about today?
Well, I'm really thinking about 2 things. I think first and foremost, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for women this year and their unborn children because, as you and many of your listeners know, Roe versus Wade could be on its way out as soon as this summer. It could be overturned for the first time in 49 years. And I'm really hopeful for the systems and infrastructures that are in place. I think we are ready. I think we still have a lot of work to do in terms of serving women, but I'm so excited to see what the future holds for the unborn in our society. But the second thing I also feel is there's like a sober, almost mourning that goes into the understanding that, this year marks over 62 million lives that have been lost at abortion. And I certainly hope that society pays attention to that and that is moving.
Chelsea, as we just heard in Charlene's reporting, there seems to be a cultural shift in attitudes towards abortion. Why do you think that is, and what do you think that means in terms of abortion in America?
Yes, well, I think the science and technology and medicine has all caught up to what we know to be true from a biblical standpoint even, and as humans, that truthfully, the life in the womb, it is human and it is alive. And all of these things have aligned in a beautiful way to really make pro-life cultural changes and pro-life generational changes.
Well, right now, a woman's right to an abortion is tied to the 14th Amendment and the right to privacy. As a constitutional attorney, can you explain how Roe can be overturned in a legally sound way that perhaps also addresses the concerns from the other side? They often talk about undoing decades of precedent. How legally damaging could that be?
I don't think it would be at all, actually. The Supreme Court, this is the best kept secret for any of you out there, they overturn their own precedents every single term. Every single year, the Supreme Court overturns old precedents and bad precedents. And we know that Roe and Casey, those foundational abortion cases, they are fundamentally bad precedents. There is no right to abortion enshrined in the Constitution. It doesn't speak to the right to abortion whatsoever. And I think the justices have affirmed that over the year, that even liberal legal scholars have said it is an incredibly criticized decision and badly legally reasoned. And so it would actually help, I think, the validity of the court to overturn Roe and really get the constitutional law turned back to the states for the states where it belongs to regulate.
All right, Chelsea Yeoman with Human Coalition, thank you so much for your time today. I know it was a big day for you and many in the pro-life movement.
It is. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you. Well, taking the diplomatic approach, the United States still trying to avoid a military conflict with the Russian army positioned to possibly invade Ukraine. Even after high-stakes talks between America's top diplomat and the Russian foreign minister in Geneva, still no breakthrough.
We've been very clear with Russia that any Russian forces going into Ukraine constitute an invasion that will be receiving a very swift, united and severe response.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken stressing to his Russian counterpart that there are still two paths forward: diplomacy or severe consequences for Russia if it invades Ukraine. Blinken even suggesting a possible second summit between President Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, here now, Dr. Richard Land, President Emeritus of Southern Evangelical Seminary and Executive Editor of the Christian Post. Richard, thank you so much for joining us on Faith Nation. In your latest column, you called Ukraine a, quote, litmus test for Western civilization. Dr. Land, can you explain your thinking there?
Sure. If Russia is able to successfully invade Ukraine, that is a green light to the bad boys, to the despots all over the world. It instructs China about what they can do in Taiwan. It instructs the Iranians about what they can do. We have a moral obligation to the Ukrainians. In 1991, 1992, when the Soviet Union ceased to exist, the Ukraine, for a brief moment, was the third leading nuclear power in the world. They had about a third of the nuclear weapons that had belonged to the Soviet Union. President Bill Clinton convinced them to give up those weapons because we didn't want nuclear proliferation. And in exchange, we signed a treaty in which we guaranteed the sovereignty of the Ukraine. So they trusted us. And if we let them down and we don't give them arms to defend themselves and give them the means to defend their freedom, who's going to believe us in the future? Our honor, our word is at stake here. And, you know, when you have despots respond to weakness, the Russians invaded Afghanistan in 1980 because Jimmy Carter was perceived as weak. Joe Biden is perceived as weak. Does anybody think that Russia would be considering invading Ukraine if Donald Trump were still president? Of course they wouldn't. The disgraceful performance by the president in his press conference, in which he said, well, a minor incursion wouldn't be so bad. That's appalling. That is, you never want to give an opening or a sign of weakness that somebody could get away with something. I thought we had learned that at Munich, but evidently we haven't.
Dr. Land, you heard earlier Secretary of State Antony Blinken telling Moscow today Russia has two paths forward, more talks or severe consequences if Russia invades Ukraine. What do you make of that choice, and do you think Russia sees it as that?
No, I don't. I think that they think that President Biden and Blinken are weak sisters. You know, Blinken, winking, and nod. They just are not. The Russians don't take them seriously. And you know, the biggest danger of a major war is miscalculation. If I'm old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was in high school, and the Cuban Missile Crisis happened because after the Bay of Pigs, Khrushchev mistakenly thought that he could get away with pushing Kennedy around, and he almost didn't believe Kennedy that we were not going to allow missiles to become operational in Cuba until it was too late. The miscalculation from big ambiguity or weakness is the single greatest danger of a major war.
All right, Dr. Richard Land, we are out of time. Thank you so much for spending time with us today to talk about your column and your thoughts. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. God bless.
Well, when we come back, coming up for air as a show of force, but is it enough to meet America's growing threats around the world? More when Faith Nation returns. A show of force, that in essence is how the military described a recent port call when a powerful U.S. submarine surfaced in Guam, signaling the power, capability, and readiness of the U.S. Navy both to our allies and adversaries. As CBN National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke reports, Some experts, though, warn it also exposed the United States' limitations.
When it comes to weapons in the U.S. Navy's arsenal, ballistic missile submarines are some of the most powerful. Considered a part of the nuclear triad, their whereabouts are a closely guarded secret.
The submarine deployment obviously is a very important posture because it deals with deterrence.
Territorial tensions with China are escalating, and the Navy says the presence of the USS Nevada reflected the United States' commitment to our regional allies. Some defense experts argue the current threat deserves a much larger show of force.
But when you think about it, one submarine, one sighting in X number of years, and it's a newsworthy event. That kind of says something in and of itself.
Dakota Wood with the Heritage Institute points to the large-scale military exercises of the Cold War, efforts that showed what the U.S. was capable of if provoked.
It provides some insight into the paucity or the low level and quantity of things that the U.S. military is now able to do because of lack of capacity, and how a single event, an aircraft overflight, a single bomber leaves the United States to fly over a particular country. I don't know that I would be that impressed if I were in Beijing or Moscow.
Miles Yu, a former Chinese policy advisor in the Trump administration, says the stakes in the Indo-Pacific are incredibly high.
For many decades, the United States, and for that matter, much part of the Western alliance, mistakenly believed that Taiwan is perhaps the only piece that China wants to dominate, to take. We now see that Taiwan is but the beginning of a chain of aggression.
Yu says that if Taiwan falls, China will turn its attention to the rest of the region.
If China starts this chain of aggression, China should be made fully aware that it will be further isolated, even completely cut off from the free world.
Yu says that despite the rapid growth of China's military, the U.S. remains the dominant power. Keeping Beijing in check, however, will require leadership from Washington. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thanks, Caitlin. Coming up, the midterm elections still 9 months away, but that's crunch time for both parties. Hear from the head of the Republican National Committee up next. Welcome back. The midterm elections are 9 months away, and the political headwinds appear to favor Republicans. The official leading the party tells CBN News she thinks the Democratic Party doesn't care about the problems Americans face today, adding that while the GOP is positioned to win back the House and Senate, they still have a lot of work to do. Here's CBN's David Brody.
If polls are accurate, the Democrat Party will be in for a rude awakening in November's midterm elections. At this point, the crises seem too many to name, although in my interview with RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, she came with a list.
I mean, David, what hasn't gone wrong for the Democrats? And it's not a joyful thing because the American people are the ones suffering as a result of their failed leadership. Let's look at inflation, our empty grocery store shelves, what our kids suffered through with this pandemic and being out of school, and still schools that are out right now and virtual. And I think the biggest issue is they don't seem to care. They don't seem to understand that Americans are really hurting under their policies and their leadership.
With a Democrat platform embracing abortion at any stage, McDaniel believes Republicans can make inroads on the life issue.
We are very proud to fight for the unborn and actually follow the science.
So what's the best route to victory in the midterms? Although Donald Trump may be toxic to some, McDaniel doesn't shy away from the former president.
Well, there's no question he's incredibly popular in our party. I think his popularity's grown as we've contrasted what he did with his administration policy-wise versus what we're seeing under Biden. And he's going to be a key in the midterms. We're going to need him out.
One outreach, however, is drawing criticism. The new RNC Pride Coalition. Is the RNC okay with the LGBT sexuality agenda? Because, look, conservative Christians say it's damaging the moral underpinnings of our Judeo-Christian culture. They don't think you should do this. I know you've been getting a lot of pushback. I've got to ask you about it. Do you regret that at all?
So it's actually a gay outreach, and it's similar to what the Trump campaign had. And listen, this is what I always say: because you invite someone to your church doesn't mean you change your doctrine.
McDaniel wants a big tent and will let Republican voters decide who should be representing their party, even if they are more moderate. Are you looking to purge these rhinos within the Republican Party?
I don't know if I like the word purge. I think that's a tough word. I think
Okay,
we let the process play out. We look to represent the voters.
The party also wants to be represented fairly in upcoming presidential debates. They've asked potential contenders to sign a pledge to not participate with the Commission on Presidential Debates due to past controversies. But then what happens? What does that venue potentially look like? Like conservative think tanks, conservative groups? What
well, we can negotiate directly with networks. We can negotiate with universities and go to the DNC.
But for now, 2022 remains the main focus.
Let's look at what Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are doing to this country. They want to strip away religious freedom. They voted for taxpayer-funded abortions. They are all right with abortions being done on a due date. It is radical, their agenda. They want to strip away the filibuster. They want to stack the Supreme Court, which would upend everything we stand for in this country. So every single day, I'm going to talk about Democrats.
David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Coming up, remembering the life of a pioneering military pilot, breaking barriers and setting the pace for generations of others. And finally tonight, a moment to join with the many remembering one of the last surviving Tuskegee Airmen, Charles Mcgee, who died earlier this week at the age of 102. Known as a man of integrity, Mcgee became the first African-American to oversee a stateside Air Force wing and base in the Integrated Air Force, fighting both racism and combat missions in 3 wars. Mcgee distinguished himself as one of a few pilots, black or white, who flew combat missions during both the Korean and Vietnam Wars. After retiring with the rank of colonel in 1973, he later went on to earn his doctorate and celebrated his 100th birthday with a promotion to general. We end tonight with Mcgee's words from when he accepted his doctoral degree a couple of years ago, saying, quote, "Life can be rewarding. Mine certainly has been. From beginning to end, a blessing from God." A life well lived and an example for all of us, an example of service for all of us. Well, that does it for tonight's Faith Nation. We appreciate you watching. Have a great weekend. And don't forget our special 2-hour programming this weekend. You can find more information on our website at cbnnews.com. Thanks so much.